Hi, everyone. I'm Anita Sharma. You're watching A News. Here's what's making news right now. Vladimir Putin says Russia is ready for a missile duel with the U.S. The D8 summit kicks off in Cairo, and Azerbaijan becomes the first new member. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump continues his war of words, creating more pressure for Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau. We begin in Russia with President Vladimir Putin suggesting a missile duel with the United States would show how Russia's new Oryshnik hypersonic ballistic missile could defeat any U.S. missile defense system. Putin issued the challenge during his annual press conference, answering questions on a range of topics, including surging inflation in his country.
Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the nation's economic challenges and relations with the West during his annual press conference on Thursday. Speaking on inflation and economic overheating, Putin acknowledged the difficulties caused by rising prices. He warned that inflation is set to exceed the central bank's target, reaching around 9.3% this year, while real wages have grown by 9%.
There are some issues here, namely inflation, a certain overheating of the economy, and the government and the central bank are already tasked with bringing these rates down.
He also suggested that the central bank could have acted sooner and that sanctions and a poor harvest contributed to the inflationary pressures. Putin noted that while the economy may grow by 4% this year, it would likely slow in the next due to the tight monetary policies. On Russia's missile capabilities, Putin addressed skepticism over the country's new Oryshnik hypersonic missile, proposing a, quote, high-tech duel to demonstrate its superiority over U.S. missile defense system.
We propose them and those in the West and the United States who pay them for their analysis to conduct some kind of technological experiment, a high-tech duel for the 21st century. Let them name some object, let's say in Kiev, concentrate all their air defense and missile defense forces there, and we will hit it with the Oryshnik and see what happens. We are ready for such an experiment. Is the other side ready?
Regarding the ongoing war with Ukraine, Putin said he was open to negotiations with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Putin reiterated his willingness for talks.
Politics is the art of compromise, and we have always said that we are ready for both negotiations and compromises. It's just that the opposite side, in the literal and figurative sense of the word, refused to negotiate.
During the press conference, Putin also expressed that relations with China had reached historic levels, with both countries aligning their actions on the global stage.
Our Dasha Chernyshova from Moscow has more on this matter.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has wrapped up 2024 with an annual press conference combined with a question and answer session that lasted more than 4 hours. He started addressing the Russian economy and said over the past 2 years they grew by some 8%, which he said is faster than in Europe or the United States. Although he admitted that the economy was overheating and said growing inflation was a worrying signal. He also said that Russia has become stronger and more sovereign over the past 2 years. Speaking about Ukraine, President Putin said Moscow was ready for compromise or talks, but said that Kyiv should be ready for that as well. He claimed that Moscow was advancing along the entire front line and said Russian fighters are taking territory in square kilometers every day. He also promised to the residents of the Kursk region that their homes will be liberated and the Ukrainian units driven out, but did not specify when that would happen. Vladimir Putin was asked about the difference in payments to the fighters of the special military operation and participants of the counterterrorism operation in Kursk. According to the president, the Ministry of Defense should have paid attention to this and promised that those payments will be recalculated. He said that the murder of General Igor Kirillov this week was a terrorist attack that threatened the lives of many people. On Syria, President Putin said Bashar al-Assad's fall was not a blow to Moscow. He said Russian involvement, which began a decade ago, was aimed at fighting terrorism. And he says that today Moscow maintains contacts with all forces in Syria. He also said that Moscow has proposed to use Russian military bases in Syria for humanitarian purposes, but Moscow will think about retaining those bases in future. He also said that he had not yet with former president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, who was granted asylum in Russia. Speaking about US President-elect Donald Trump, Putin said that he was ready to meet and talk, but said that he did not know when that would happen. And the Russian president also commented on the relations with Beijing, saying that the ties have reached an unprecedentedly high level, and the two were coordinating their actions on the international stage. Dasha Chernysova in Moscow for A News.
In Egypt, the Developing Aid Organization for Economic Cooperation Summit opened in Cairo. Leaders are expected to talk about investments plus security issues.
The D8 summit in Cairo, held under the theme Investigating in Youth and Supporting SMEs, Shaping Tomorrow's Economy, is scheduled to hold a special session on the situation in Palestine and Lebanon. The leaders of the major Muslim developing countries are attending the summit, along with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Lebanese caretaker Prime Minister Najib Mikati, and Azerbaijan's Prime Minister Ali Asadov. Developing Aid Organization for Economic Cooperation, or D8, represents a significant economic market, with member states having a combined population of over 1 billion and a gross domestic product of around $5 trillion. Established in 1997, the organization aims to strengthen its members' positions in the global economy through increased economic cooperation, trade diversification, enhanced international participation, and improved living standards.
Still with the D8 summit, Azerbaijan is unanimously elected as a new member of the Developing Eight, marking the organization's first expansion since its founding. The Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry says this move reflects the country's growing global influence and the trust it earned internationally. The D8, established back in 1997, unites Muslim-majority countries that have significant economic potential, fostering cooperation in trade, transport, communication, and other vital sectors. Current members include Bangladesh, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Egypt, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Turkey. The United Kingdom imposes sanctions on 5 senior Georgian officials in response to the government's handling of recent protests. The demonstrations erupted after the suspension of EU accession talks. The sanctions specifically target high-ranking members of Georgia's Interior Ministry who were held responsible for overseeing the harsh actions against protesters. The alleged excessive use of force by law enforcement led to the UK imposing sanctions on the officials involved. Protests erupted in Georgia after Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze's decision last month to suspend negotiations on the country's bid to join the European Union, citing, and I quote, blackmail and manipulation from the bloc's politicians. A lawmaker was killed, another wounded, this after a shooting at the Parliament of Abkhazia, a breakaway Georgian region. The suspected shooter, a fellow lawmaker, fled the scene, and authorities are now investigating.
A shooting inside the so-called Parliament of Abkhazia, a breakaway region of Georgia, led to the death of a secessionist politician, Vakhtang Golandzia. Another victim of the incident, Kan Kvarchia, was injured.
2 patients were brought to the Republican hospital. Patient Golandzia was brought in a state of clinical death. He was immediately taken to the intensive care unit, where urgent resuscitation measures were started. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful, and the patient passed away. Patient Kvarchia was also brought in with a gunshot wound to the shoulder and scalp. The patient is currently in surgery, and the team of surgeons is attending to his condition.
Adgur Karazia, a fellow politician, was identified as the suspect in the shooting. He fled the scene, and the motive for the attack remains unknown. This comes amid ongoing political unrest in Abkhazia, following protests that forced the resignation of the separatist leader over a controversial investment deal with Russia.
Turkey welcomes the EU's recognition of its candidate status, calling it, quote, an accurate and realistic approach. Ankara also praised the resumption of high-level economic dialogue and European Investment Bank activities in the country. The statement follows the EU General Affairs Council's annual conclusions on the enlargement process. It includes Brussels' acknowledgement that Turkey remains a candidate country and a key partner in many areas of joint interest. A UK Royal Air Force's Eurofighter Typhoon fighter jet landed in Ankara for inspection by Turkish officials. The country earlier expressed interest in buying the jets jointly produced by the UK, Germany, Italy, and Spain.
The arrival of this jet provided an opportunity for Turkish officials to observe the aircraft closely. Turkish Defense Minister Yaşar Güler announced on December 14th that 2 Eurofighter jets, which recently participated in a drill in Qatar, would arrive in Ankara to allow Turkish authorities to inspect the aircraft. Güler also emphasized that discussions regarding Ankara's potential purchase of the Eurofighter jets were progressing positively. Eurofighter Typhoon warplanes are a joint production of the UK, Germany, Italy, and Spain. While Ankara has expressed interest in acquiring the warplanes, the process has been complicated by Germany's objections, as approval from all producing nations is required for the sale. In recent years, Germany has largely blocked arms sales to Turkey due to domestic political pressures in Berlin and differing foreign policy stances, primarily influenced by the Greens Party, a coalition partner for Chancellor Olaf Scholz.
A series of Israeli airstrikes struck targets in Yemen, including energy infrastructure in the capital, Sana'a, after Tel Aviv said it intercepted a missile fired from Yemen.
Early Thursday morning, sirens blared across central Israel as a missile launched from Yemen was intercepted by the Israeli Air Force. The projectile, which triggered a loud explosion, was heading towards the country from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen. While no casualties were reported in Israel, debris from the interception caused significant damage to a school in Ramat Gan, near Tel Aviv, where the main building collapsed and classes were canceled for younger students. In response to the missile attack, the Israeli military confirmed conducting a series of precision airstrikes on Houthi military sites, including ports and energy infrastructure in Sana'a. According to Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, a spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Forces, these sites were strategically used by the Houthis in military operations. Masira TV, the news outlet controlled by the Houthi movement, reported that Israeli strikes also targeted the port of Salif and the Ras Sisa oil facility in Hodeidah, killing at least 9 people. In addition, central power stations both south and north of Sana'a were hit. Later, fire trucks were seen responding to a power plant in Sana'a. The Houthi group, which has launched numerous missiles and drone attacks against Israel, has justified these actions as solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, who have been under heavy Israeli bombardment since October 2023.
For more on the airstrikes, let's go now to our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv.
Well, that incoming missile siren sounded just before 3 a.m., sending Israelis here in Tel Aviv and central Israel into their shelters. Explosions were heard, and we are now being told by the Israeli Defense Force that one of those missiles fired from Yemen did in fact land in a school. Photos released here in Israeli media show significant damage to a school building and debris in a playground. It is understood that the missile was struck by the Iron Dome air defence system, but as its debris fell, its warhead did manage to hit the ground, which is why we've seen that significant destruction. But given that it was at around 3 in the morning, the school, of course, was empty and there were no children inside. The IDF quickly springing into action, though. We understand Israeli Air Force jets making that 2,000-kilometre journey to Yemen, launching a wave of airstrikes in response, both on the capital, Sana'a, and also the port city of Hodeidah. They say that they were targeting Houthi military infrastructure and sites. We saw photos of significant explosions at power stations, oil storage facilities, and also port facilities. Now, we know that this has been happening for some time. The Houthi have been stepping up the number of attacks on Israel, both with drones and ballistic missiles. And they are saying that they are doing this in support of the people of Gaza, who, of course, continue to be under siege from this ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. But the Houthi really are now quite isolated in many ways, with that ceasefire still appearing to be holding between Hezbollah and Israel in the north, and of course with Hamas seriously weakened by the 14 months of war there or so, and of course proxies in Syria now taking a backseat given the fall of the Assad regime. It really only leaves the Houthi, which are continuing these attacks as part of that so-called Iranian-backed axis of resistance. The US, the UK have been launching their own airstrikes on Yemen in response to all of this and those attacks on international shipping. But despite those continued airstrikes, it appears the Houthi are continuing to launch these aerial attacks. There is some discussion underway here in Israel, certainly in the media, that the IDF has prepared major strike plans to try and, quote-unquote, decapitate the Houthi rebels. They say that plan is now sitting on the desk of the Prime Minister and the government, waiting for official sign-off. Again, the Houthis say they are doing this in support of the Palestinian people in Gaza, where we understand those ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas are still ongoing, both in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, as well as the Qatari capital, Doha. Trent Murray for A News, Tel Aviv.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky holds talks with NATO and European officials about Ukraine's security needs. Zelensky says the meetings are a valuable opportunity to address both immediate and long-term security guarantees for his country.
President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky met with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and European leaders during his two-day visit to Brussels. Zelensky stressed the need for a unified position among Ukraine and its international partners to strengthen Ukraine's defenses. NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte showed his support and indicated the alliance will do its best.
Very much high on the agenda is to make sure that the President, his team, Ukraine are in the best possible position one day, when they decide so, to start the peace talks. And that means that we have to do everything now to make sure that when it comes to air defense, when it comes to other weapon systems, that we make sure that we provide whatever we can. We know
Zelensky highlighted the importance of the meetings to align Ukraine's future security and noted that reliable guarantees were crucial for achieving lasting peace.
I think it's a very good opportunity to speak about security guarantees for Ukraine for today and for tomorrow, as you said. Well, almost everything said. But it's really very important that to use these 2 days in Brussels to meet with all our partners and to have the same, what is very important, not divided, the same joint position of Europe.
Rutte reaffirmed NATO's commitment to Ukraine, including the provision of air defense systems and weapons, with $1 billion pledged in security assistance this year. He also announced that NATO's command center in Wiesbaden, Germany, is now operational, aiding Ukraine's troop training and security efforts.
allies remain committed to delivering on the financial pledge of 40 billion euros in security assistance for Ukraine this year. And the NATO command in Wiesbaden for security assistance and training for Ukraine is now up and running. But we must go further to decisively change the course of this war.
In addition to his talks with NATO leaders, Zelensky also met with French President Emmanuel Macron to discuss the potential deployment of foreign peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. This proposal first raised by Macron in February. According to Zelensky's post on X, No consensus has been reached during informal meeting, but the two leaders continued to explore the possibility.
The winter season has arrived in Canada, but the nation's prime minister seems to be on thinning ice due to biting political tension. Justin Trudeau faces growing criticism from opposition parties and members of his very own party after the abrupt resignation of his finance minister. Meantime, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is doubling down with controversial remarks about Canada, drawing international attention to the country's domestic drama. With a confidence vote on Trudeau's leadership looming in early in the new year, it sets the stage for a high-stakes political showdown.
President-elect Donald Trump recently joked about Canada becoming the 51st U.S. state, claiming on Truth Social that it would save Canadians on taxes and military expenses. A Ledger poll suggests that 13% of Canadians support the idea. Trump had previously made the same joke at the Mar-a-Lago dinner, linking it to combating fentanyl trafficking and illegal migration. Since then, Trump has referred to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as the Governor of Canada, sparking further controversy. Meanwhile, Trudeau is grappling with a political crisis following the resignation of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. Freeland opposed Trudeau's policies, including a sales tax holiday and direct cash payments, which she criticized as costly political gimmicks. She also expressed concern over Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, a key point of disagreement with Trudeau.
That's when people are vulnerable to the demagogue.
The situation escalated during heated debates in Canada's House of Commons before the winter break. With Trudeau absent, opposition MP Andrew Scheer criticizes leadership, highlighting internal turmoil and a $62 billion budget deficit that exceeded the earlier $40 billion target. In an effort to stabilize his administration, Trudeau appointed Dominic LeBlanc as finance minister. LeBlanc defended the government's economic policies, emphasizing growth, support for Canadians, and a strong debt-to-GDP ratio. Amid growing criticism and waning public support, with Conservatives polling at 43% compared to the Liberals' 23%, Trudeau rejected calls for his resignation. He reaffirmed his commitment to addressing challenges such as inflation, global conflicts, and threats to democracy. With the Liberal Party holding a minority in Parliament, a confidence vote on Trudeau's leadership is expected in early 2025.
Joining me now is Dr. Aditi Malhotra from Toronto, Canada. She's a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Aditi, there is so much speculation about how the political landscape will change when U.S. President-elect Donald Trump returns to the Oval Office, but the drama has already unfolded. What do you think this means for Canada with Trump's return?
Thank you for having me, Anita. With Trump actually re-entering the Oval Office next year, Canada will face renewed pressure when it comes to the threat of tariffs or the mounting pressure on Canada to increase its military spending. This is a familiar playbook that we've seen previously. During the previous Trump administration, Canada has renegotiated the NAFTA, which eventually gave us the CUSMA, the Canada-US-Mexico agreement. And it wasn't the best of negotiations because we were dealing with tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum industry, and also the softwood lumber. And Canada also imposed retaliatory tariffs, which costed almost $16.6 billion.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at, a rerun of this again, I guess, but at a much more intense level because Trump has a larger mandate and he will be more than enthusiastic to use tariffs as his functional tool for negotiations.
Well, he's also very enthusiastic about social media. Now it's Truth Social, his platform. Ahead of his social media post about making Canada a 51st state, he previously took aim at Chrystia Freeland, the now former finance minister, saying, and I quote, "Her behavior was totally toxic and not at all conducive to making deals which are good for the very unhappy citizens of Canada. That may have folks wondering just how those negotiations went when they were renegotiating NAFTA, which is now known as USMCA, as you noted, or as the Canadians say, CUSMA.
So what we see on social media is Trump being Trump. He definitely has a quirky sense of humor, and talking seriously, his discussions on social media about Canada would be quite an affront to any sovereign country. But considering that it's Trump's style of humor, that's something which we are all used to by now. When it comes to negotiations, of course, it's no secret that Trump wasn't a fan of the former Deputy Minister of Canada and also the Economic Minister, Chrystia Freeland. And with her now not being a part of the renegotiation, it would be interesting because she was a very important and a key figure during the last negotiations. And during the recent Mar-a-Lago interactions, we did not see her there. So that definitely, gave an idea of what was to come. And what we're looking at ahead is going to be even more intense, as I said, with the new leadership, with a new economic and finance minister. We would see something more different now, along the same lines, though.
Well, that brings me beautifully to my next question. We've had the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, from Canada's largest province, essentially saying that with all these threats, these tariff threats from Trump, that he is ready to fight back. We've seen this before, right?
Oh, for sure. We did see Canada imposing retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. In 2018. And to be very frank, even though, the whole trade war and the tariffs war seem doable and practical in the short term, but it actually is not the best when it comes to the long-term consequences. Mm-hmm. Looking at how dependent Canada is on the U.S. being Canada's largest trading partner, yeah. And their annual trade figures are almost amounting to like $700 billion mm-hmm. annually. So we're looking at a very intertwined relationship where almost 70 to 75% of Canadian, exports are actually going to the U.S. So any trade war and tariffs on Canadian goods, which would make them more expensive in the U.S. and make them less competitive in the U.S. market, would harm and considerably the Canadian economy, because it has the potential to harm the key Canadian industries, such as automotive, steel, manufacturing, and it can also disrupt trade and the integrated supply chains between the two countries. So I think the key for the Canadian leadership is to balance Canadian interests and protect its own industry while maintaining a good relationship with the U.S. So this is a high-stakes scenario, and it has to be dealt with very sensibly.
And the world is watching, right, Dr. Malhotra? Of course, this is right now Canada bearing the brunt of the tariff talk, of the insults essentially that are being hurled at members of the government in Canada. The world is watching because they know and perhaps fear they could be next.
For sure. I think what we're seeing right now is a case study for the world to extract some lessons for them itself. With Trump, tariff being his favorite word and his functional tool for negotiations, we would see him use the same strategies when it comes to negotiating with his allies and other partner countries. He's already threatened BRICS as well. So the BRICS countries are also definitely very closely going to look at what's happening between US and Canada and extract the relevant lessons.
Dr. Malhotra, as many folks get ready for the holidays, and we know that members of Parliament are also on holiday break, what do you think we can expect in the new year?
So this is a holiday season which may not be as peaceful for a lot of folks in the political realm. So we're likely to see Prime Minister Justin Trudeau face mounting pressure to step down, specifically given his low approval ratings and his leadership, which is already under question by public and his own party, clearly shows that this is his biggest political test to date. So we would be looking at more intense maneuvering at the political level within the Liberal Party, and that would raise questions about Justin Trudeau's ability to unite the party or ability to continue with new leaders for some ministries. We may also see increased pressure on the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, who is actually keeping the Trudeau government in power by withholding the no confidence motion, because they fear that their party may also not come back to power. So it is a very interesting tug of war right now. But apart from the political maneuvering that we would see in the interim, we would get clearer answers only in 2025 when the parliament resumes.
You talk about the NDP. Of course, the Liberals are governing with the help of the NDP, but it's the Conservatives. It's the Conservative Party of Canada that many believe stands to gain here if, in fact, an election is called. And you got to wonder if, in fact, the Prime Minister will call an election, because you alluded to the polls, you alluded to his low approval rating as it pertains to Trudeau. But Pierre Poilievre, he must be quite excited right now.
Yes, so when it comes to the political scenario, for the Conservatives, this seems to be a good opportunity in case there is, a situation where the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, actually steps down. That would be an opportunity for the Conservatives to build on the momentum that they've created so far. And they have had, very good approval ratings so far. So they're definitely looking at an interesting and a more optimistic period if Trudeau steps down as the Prime Minister.
Certainly not a happy holiday season, especially not for the Liberal Party, right?
Oh, yes, of course. To be very frank, what's happening in Canada right now, the political upheaval and the chaos, is definitely not good for the country overall. But when we specifically look at the political spectrum, I think we have, some losses and some wins here. So Christmas is definitely a very interesting period for Canada this year. For a lot of folks looking at Justin Trudeau being cornered by a lot of resignations from his own party, it's akin to Santa, showing his magic. And for a lot of others, it is more about just Grinch being Grinch.
Exactly.
So it depends on where you are on the political spectrum.
That is Dr. Aditi Malhotra from Toronto. Let's get to some other news now from Mozambique. Very troubling. The official death toll from the impact of Cyclone Cheeto now rises to 45. Nearly 10,000 houses were destroyed. Some villages have hardly any standing houses now. Close to 200,000 people urgently need humanitarian aid. In neighboring Malawi, the death toll rises to 13 after the cyclone hit continental Africa following its passage through Mayotte. French President Emmanuel Macron landed on the Indian Ocean archipelago of Mayotte days after the French overseas territory was hit by the devastating cyclone. At least 31 people are confirmed dead so far, but local officials fear the complete toll could be even higher, reaching hundreds, even thousands.
Cyclone Cheeto has killed at least 31 people, with local officials fearing the death toll could rise to thousands. More than 1,300 injuries have been reported. On Wednesday, supplies began arriving in Mayotte to address critical needs, including food and water. Residents flocked to distribution points and wells, desperately filling jerry cans and buckets as water supplies remain severely disrupted. Some turned to rivers for laundry and personal hygiene.
We have no choice. The water is very, very dirty. We shower with it, we scratch ourselves. It hurts us a lot. But we have no choice, especially for the children when they shower. They scratch themselves a lot.
We haven't seen anyone from the government and all that. For the moment, we have hope. We were told that there was help on the way. So for now, we organize ourselves as the best we can. For example, we have made our well available to people. It has been in use since the beginning of the crisis. Every day from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., lots of people come here.
Authorities in Mayotte have pledged to restore running water to half the population by this weekend. 120 tons of food aid continues being distributed in France's poorest overseas territory. An air bridge from nearby Réunion Island has been established, and the ship carrying over 100 containers of aid is en route, expected to reach Mayotte within 3 days.
Less than 24 hours after the cyclone hit, there were already 3 air rotations on the runway in Mayotte, which is close to commercial traffic, as you know. We have a considerable increase in power of the resources committed by the state. Already there are 9 flights, 9 round trips to Mayotte, state planes and Air Austral planes that are chartered by the state.
French authorities have shared footage of bottled water and food being distributed in Pamanzi, with gendarmeries and soldiers ensuring the security of the operations. However, the full scale of the damage remains unclear, with relief efforts hampered by inaccessible areas and ongoing infrastructure challenges.
On a lighter note now, there's a new concept of Santa Claus using AI, and it answers children's questions through the screen.
Welcome to Santa's Study.
Normally, we use AI engines such as ChatGPT to ask questions and receive prompt answers. But this Christmas season, Ask Santa is a fun, interactive program that lets kids chat with Santa Claus one by Breakthrough T1D, a nonprofit gathering donations for type 1 diabetes research.
I'm so very proud of you for being on the nice list.
Santa Claus, how many reindeer do you have?
Oh, I have so many I couldn't even count. But you know, I have the famous Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen, and of course, Rudolph.
The program uses Storyfile's conversational video technology, combining AI with pre-filmed content to create safe, real-time interactions for children.
Away from you. So, if I seem a little slow with my answers, it might be a problem with my Wonderland Wi-Fi.
It is so amazing, the technology behind Ask Santa. Storyfile interviewed Santa for hours and hours on end. There is no going out to the internet like ChatGPT or other AI platforms. The questions are all in the database. Santa can't hallucinate. He can't make up crazy questions from ChatGPT. It is a safe and secure platform for your kids to talk to Santa.
Originally developed during the COVID-19 pandemic, Storyfile partnered with Breakthrough T1D this year to use Ask Santa as a fundraising tool.
I don't see you there.
That's all from us. On behalf of our team, thank you so much for watching A News. Please stay up to date by visiting our website, anews.tv. Bye for now.